Այսօր պատիվ ունենք Gruia Badescu, ես հույսով ճիշտ ասացի, անազգանն իա հետ հանդիպելու։ Gruian իմ շատ լավ բարեկամն է, ում հետ արդեն 1-1.5 տարի տարբեր արդյունքներով բնդապի հետ համագործակցում ենք, եւ ես երբևիցե որ մեկին ներկայացնելուց չեմ ներկայացել այսպես ասած անցյալը թե որտեղ է սովորել եւ այլն, բայց քանի որ Gruian հատկապես երիտասարդ է, նույնիսկ ինձնից երիտասարդ է, դրա համար կարծում եմ որ հատուկ պետք է նշեմ մի քիչ իր մասին պատմեմ ձեզ։ Ուրեմն Gruian մագիստրոսի կոչում ունի urban design-ում LSE-ում եւ այդ ժամանակ ինքը մասնակցել է The Cities ծրագրին, որը LSE եւ ընդհանրապես քաղաքաշինության ոլորտում այսօր համարվում ամենաուժեղ կրթական եւ հետազոտական ծրագրերից մեկը։ Եվ այս ներկա պահին քաղաքաշինությունում աննա PhD ասպիրանտուրա Քեմբրիջի համալսարանում եւ Gruian վերջին 1 տարվա ընթացքում Հայաստանում ներգրավված է եղել Եվրամիության ֆինանսավորմամբ իրականացվող ինտեգրված քաղաքային զարգացում ծրագրին որպես միջազգային էքսպերտ եւ խորհրդատվություն է մատուցել Հայաստանի քաղաքներին, ինչպիսին են Դիլիջան, Երեգնաձոր եւ Ապարան։ Ես էլ չեմ խոսում, բայց կարծում եմ այն թեման, որ այսօր Gruian ներկայացնելու է եւ հատկապես դա փորձելու է ցույց տա ինչպես են իրանք իրականացնել Բուխարեստի դեպքում, որ Երևանի բազմաթիվ բաներով ունի շատ ընդհանրություններ, կարծում եմ մեզ բոլորիս համար շատ հետաքրքիր է։ Stage is yours. I said many good things about you, so you can.
I just want to say I'm not guilty. Thank you very much for this. What I presume is a kind of introduction because ever since we met for this project in Black Sea Corporation on integrated development, I discovered in Sarhat, let's say, not only a great colleague but also a great friend, and he's really it's really inspiring to see that Yerevan and Bucharest are fighting similar issues, and we're trying to go through them tonight. And hopefully this will be also not only interesting, but also maybe meaningful for you to this here. First of all, I want to ask how many of you have been to Bucharest? Oh, okay. 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 Then how many of you have heard about integrated urban development? So because the reason why I'm asking this also to calibrate it the way I'm going to speak, but it's good because I did think I'm not going to just talk to you about a plan of integrated urban development because that will be meaningless if we don't actually set the stage. So what I want to do tonight is actually talk about the process of doing a process of integrated urban development. That might explain the weird title. So again, what does it mean? What do we need? Integrated urban development. But I want to start from the real situation of Bucharest and how did it get into shape. Because you see, there are internal factors and also external factors of the European Union. But then the synthesis of this actually led to this plan. And I'm very curious to know your reactions afterwards. Okay. So the whole roadmap for today is that first we're going to see what is actually the situation in Bucharest and the way that I define it as urban wombs. And you'll see what I mean when we're going to discuss a bit of the history of the city. And also introducing to you what is the deal with that city. But then also, as we respond to the wombs, you'll see that it's not the public sector that reacted, but it's the counter-public. Counter-public, we'll talk about what it means. It's a kind of force that's trying to fill in the lack of the public interest. But then comes the EU carrot. EU, the European Union, and the IUD is integrated urban development. And we'll talk a bit about what it means and what kind of mechanisms does the EU use to stimulate this concept. And then we're going to walk through the plan and how the process of making it and how it's actually how it goes. And I have to say that maybe the first three things will be my own interpretation. The fourth can be also seen as it's a message from the whole team that work in this project. Because I come here also as part of the team that created this plan for urban development, part of the space syntax. You might be familiar with space syntax. in Bucharest, we're dealing with different things than the usual space syntax issues, but we did use a lot of the methods. So maybe the fourth would be, let's say, an official presentation, but the first three, I'm going for those opinions. And so let's see a bit, let's go a bit into the history of Bucharest and see why do I mean urban wounds, and why would the integrated urban development plan answer to wounds. And please let me know if I speak too fast, because I have this tendency. Is it okay? Or? Okay, so if you were to arrive in Bucharest in, let's say, 1810, you will see something like this. A very sprawling city of houses and gardens. It was the second largest city after Constantinople in the whole Balkan Peninsula, 60,000 people at the beginning of the 19th century, as opposed to places like Athens or Belgrade, which were just 10,000 kind of villagey types. And it was sprawling, it was messy, it was chaotic. All the people coming there noticed also the green aspect of the city. But then, suddenly, as with the whole, what would be, let's say, Romanian intelligentsia and aristocracy, it all started to change when they started looking west towards Paris. There are many reasons for that, but let me just say that a lot of the people who studied in France, which was seen as the Latin sister, because Romanians like to be very proud about this Latin heritage. The language is very similar to Italian. At the time, it was not like Italy, which was the leading, let's say, model, but it's France. People went and studied there, and then they brought back, and they transformed Bucharest from this sprawling Balkan city into what the Greeks first called the Paris of the East. It was the Greeks who were arriving in Bucharest with trade and commerce, and they were finding these buildings, and they were saying, well, this is Paris for us. So the architecture was very much influenced by this. It was a very thriving urban life. You can see this at the beginning of the 20th century. So this was the little Paris of the Balkans. With Parisian architecture influenced a lot of the structures being built, be it public or be it private. People got inspired by the French academism. If you study architectural history, the Beaux-Arts style was very much popular in Bucharest, until at one point, architects who start being trained in Romania, they start saying, well, wait a second, we're too much enamored with Paris, we should actually remember our roots, so they come back to what is the vernacular architecture of the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains, and they bring this neo-Romanian style. You can see that some features like the columns, the typical roof, and there are many detached houses which you find in Bucharest, and this is one of the representative ones. But then comes also a reaction saying, okay, we have the French model, we have the rural model, but then we should actually look forward. We're in the 1930s, already you have the Bauhaus, you have the Art Deco, it's a clearly Art Deco influenced building in central Bucharest, and you have a main boulevard, an axis north and south, which is actually built using Bauhaus-inspired structures. So, and the city is actually receives in 1936 a medal, a European medal in Liège for urban planning and for being one of the most, let's say, forward-looking in terms of architecture and urban planning. It was going, let's say, quite well. But then comes this. In 1944-45, during the war, Soviet troops arrive, the country becomes communist, metaphor. And many things happen. Most of the owners of all those houses you saw they lose their property is nationalized. The city is seen by the party as being a bourgeois problem, and it should become a proletarian city. And at first, what happens is that around the city center, around this old city, we have all these structures which are very familiar with. It was not as much socialist realism in Romania, because in the 50s it was very little investment, but in the 60s and 70s, modernism comes back, but with a socialist twist, and these are housing estates built all around the city. But this is not what this doesn't make Bucharest at all different from any other socialist city. What will happen then in the 80s makes it already different, and then we're going to talk about urban wounds. First is this idea of let's make roads better and bigger for traffic, and we're going to line them with housing which is reflective of the new socialist era. Forget the small houses of the very sprawling bourgeois city of the past. These are the windows to modernity, socialist modernity, but also they hide a kind of like a Potemkin village, if you know Russian history. to hide actually what's the whole reality. This is already the end of the 70s and beginning of the 80s. But nothing is more important for the city's change than this intervention, which this is what you see here in yellow is actually let's say the current center of Bucharest, or you can say what was mostly built until the 1930s. Okay, there were many other areas that were more rural in character. The city did expand a lot on the sides. But so this is the old tissue, let's say, old fabric. But this red area is part of an intervention that Ceausescu, who was a dictator of Romania, he was a president of the Socialist Party then of Romania, and he was very much looking for new models for how would a socialist city should be. And he traveled to, among other places, to Pyongyang, North Korea, where he was very impressed that that city had monumental spaces where not this small bourgeois squares with Parisian flavor or small gardens or no, that city was impressive to him because he could see how one can manifest the party's power in large spaces. So he said, we need this in Bucharest. So then this axis was drawn, which was called the victory of socialism. And at the end, on the western end, the largest building in Europe, the second largest building in the world today, was built. It was supposed to be the House of the Republic. It later became the House of the People, and it was the House of the Parliament. It wasn't demolished. We can talk about this later. The point is, in order to do this, 80,000 people were relocated. All their houses were destroyed in three days' notice. A number of churches, if I'm not wrong, 11 churches, some 5 synagogues, were destroyed. Others, especially churches, were moved to make place for this monumental facades. And so you can see here images from the destruction, which was right in the center of the city. And this emerged. This is the ruler of the victory of socialism. People called it victory of socialism against the city. And this is how it looks today. So it survived. There were plans in 1999, Romania had a rather bloody revolution. The region, I didn't go here into the nature of Romanian communism. That was considered to be one of the most, it didn't have any perestroika or glasnost, let's just say. It was very Stalinist until the end. 89, there was a bloody revolution, people died, and then a change of regime of sorts. But the point is that there was a debate in 1990, what are we doing with this building? Like, it's huge, it was not really finished. And there were plans, okay, let's make it a casino to show that it's changed some systems. Let's make it something very postmodern. Let's change the destination. Now we're the parliament, which means that Ceausescu's dream is actually happened. This is the place where it all happens, and also, kind of ironically, this was where NATO had its conference a couple of years ago. So NATO in the cradle of Romanian Stalinism. It's kind of interesting. But what is interesting is that you can see that a large section of the old city, those boulevards lined with housing estates just to make face, and then this victory of socialism project took a bit of the old city apart. And the contact between that boulevard and the rest is a lot of it remains unbuilt today because of property issues. After the end of communism, people start saying, okay, we want our property back. This was taken, as you know, there were many trials. I'm not going to into the situation. I know Armenia didn't deal with restitution in the same way because you guys had a longer time under communism. But in Romania, people said, we want property back from 49 when the property was taken away. In this case, in the 80s. And so we have a lot of spaces like this. And this is going to be actually in 2 weeks in Bucharest, students from London, actually from around the world, but in the LSE Cities program, will come to Bucharest and we're going to have an urban design workshop, how to deal with these spaces. But that's another thing. But then, what is interesting is that you have these changes in a city that, after being in the 80s a very gray, depressing, grim communist society, after the 1990s, it's all about consumerism, it's all about commercials, it's all about, and it also means a desire for progress and new things. And everything that's old, the city's heritage, is kind of a result of communism, in which the old was embedded with negative connotations. Heritage is just something that's an obstacle to progress. And then you have sites like this, which are everywhere. people leaving houses in dilapidated states just because some owners would like to build a 12 stories office building, except of the old villa that was there, that his ancestors had. So then, heritage became a really interesting issue because the public authorities, who should defend it, said, well, this is just a blockage, an obstacle. We want those office buildings. We want to have progress. Progress doesn't mean looking back, it means looking forward and looking at this kind of architecture. But then, the city also became choked with traffic. This is a very common, you can see it's a police officer who's trying to make some sense of this intersection. This is very close to where I live. And then come interventions. Okay, how should we deal with this increasing traffic? Let's just make new roads, and let's demolish some more of the old city and make wider roads, ignoring the body of knowledge in urban planning in the last 30 years, which say, if you make a wider road, what do you do if you make a wider road? Does anybody know the axiom of urban planning? Oh, urban traffic, sorry.
It increases traffic.
It's really traffic. But if you tell the people in the city hall or people from the university in urban planning who actually projected this, they say, no, we're going to make it better. We're going to make it better, so we're going to reinvent the wheel. Well, nobody could. The North Americans tried to do this, the West Europeans. Why would Bucharest make it better? And so, because this is the whole issue. It's a dilemma how to deal with urban transportation, but we do know, and we have this body of research that shows that not widening roads is not a solution. And what they did, there were a number of projects all about car transportation, and they create this unsafe and negative spaces which are really not friendly to pedestrians or walkers by anyway. So then the city gets even more conflicted and it loses even more of it. And people meaning architects, urban planners, NGOs, simple residents, like what are we doing? So we're having a city that suffered in the 80s by all this destruction. We're having a city that now sells everything to private developers, choked with traffic, and we're just demolishing more for traffic. So what? And the public administration think this is the way. So then, there's a theory in political science which says you have the public, and the public is supposed to defend public interest. And then you have the counter-public. The counter-public appears in the moments when the public sector doesn't serve its own good. And but maybe to illustrate more what's the counter-public, we'll take an example of something that brings together heritage, transportation, and the counter-public. This was one of, let's say, not really central, but almost central neighborhoods, which had a very historic market. One of the last ones to sell fresh products in the center of the city before it can turn into a shopping mall in the last 10 years. And this happened about 2 years ago when the city hall decided to implement this widening project. And they just came, and in a manner that really reminded people of the 1980s, they said they took people out in the middle of the winter. There was a house here which is Berde number 65. Now it's called Berde number 32.5 because they cut it in two. And people still want to live there because it's the house that they fought to keep throughout communism, and they got it back. Anyway, the point is, they took the residents out and they just demolished it. And they want to build the office buildings here so that you know. But then the counter-public came, meaning that NGOs and younger urban planners and architects said, okay, first of all, we have to find a symbol. And they found this market. The market is supposed to be demolished. And the city hall promised, because it's a heritage building, that they will move it. Moving, if you remember, I was saying that churches were moved in the 1980s. So it's a symbol of a wound for Romanian cities. I'm talking about markets, knowing very well what you have here in Yerevan. I remember in 2008 when I saw a very beautiful market, which I really liked, and then I found out that it's not here anymore. And it's interesting to see the parallels. But here the NGOs try to even propose an alternative situation with urban regeneration. Let's not do this brutal demolition. And and NGOs said, okay, what are we doing here is this, transforming the city into a very unwelcoming place to live, where traffic and public spaces being totally trashed and occupied by cars, And as you can see, even wires everywhere, cables of IT extensions, just take the public space. Architects realize this is a problem. They put it even on, this is one of the main architecture journals. You can see an interpretation. This is our city now. What to do with it. And then a team of young architects and planners. Some urban designers, some more into architecture, some into landscape architecture. They had an idea, and let's say 2006, 2007. We need to give back the city to people. You might know about Lefebvre, the right to the city. So they just played around with the idea, and they said, okay, what if we just take a certain part of the center and we make it pedestrian. By the way, as opposed to your Avenue, Bucharest, at the time didn't have any pedestrian area because pedestrians are just useless. You need cars. So these people said, okay, let's show people what we can do if we turn some avenues into pedestrian streets, and then how that's going to affect what? It's going to affect shops. Shops are going to come there, and then the area is going to be renovated. So let's first of all give people a chance to walk and cycle and see how it is, and then ask for more. So they came with this. This is a space in that time. We'll talk more about it later. They took a number of streets, making a kind of a trajectory throughout the city, and called it Tras Central Urban București, which became at the beginning just a kind of a play. And there was some other project like this. Some other firms thought, okay, what should we do with space between that giant wall of housing and then the old houses in the back, between those spaces. Well, this one was just interested in giving a model. And this is kind of a visualization of it. You can still see the wires, but still, people are looking at. But the idea is, let's try to play and see an utopian, which in other places is normal, reality which can be answer to this wounded city. But then, we talk about country problem, and then we go into the serious stuff. 2007, Romania joins the EU. And the EU comes with a plethora of policy commitments. There's declarations which the Ministry of Regional Development signed in Romania and the member states. And you might know that the EU and Western Europe in general had this approach where they tried to replace punctual interventions with integrated urban development integration. So what does it mean? Let's see what does this mean. So integrated urban development is a relatively new concept. Let's say in France, Italy, Great Britain, and the Netherlands in the 80s, already there were some cities which were playing with this. They noticed that if you go into a deprived area and you try just to build something, or demolish and build again, you're not going to solve the problem of poverty, of job issues, social and economic issues. The only way to deal with an area is just to go and tackle, at the same time, physical improvement, and this is where architects come, but also social and economic improvement, and this is where urban planners in a way come, because they have to deal with all these aspects. And only by actually addressing all the stakeholders in the region, and by including the residents, you can actually get to the good regeneration of this area. So this project, this concept started from deprived, from poorer areas. But then, it was implemented by the EU in pilot projects in the 90s. It worked everywhere, more or less, and depending on the energy. And so then it became something recommended by the EU to be used everywhere, not only in deprived areas. So this, as you can see, you have to integrate social, economic, and spatial issues. And then also it has to integrate strategic planning. So what is a strategy? You probably, if you study urban planning, you might have been through all this. It has to have participatory, and also you have to have the residents involved. It has to be operational, so it's about planning, management. But I see that some of you are already yawning. We're not going to go into the details of this. We're just coming from a seminar which takes place down here about this, and we've seen many yawns. Let's go into the more fun stuff. Well, this is kind of what we mean. This has a very spatial component. This is a random city in Transylvania, called Bistrița. Anyway, this is just an example a visualization of a PIDU. PIDU is Integrated Plan for Urban Development. And I want to stress something. We're talking about IUD, Integrated Urban Development, and you have plans of integrated urban development in which you put all these things together. But in the case of Romania, what happens is the EU comes and says, we want you to implement this, this approach, but they get transformed into plans, integrated plans for urban development. Do you hear the difference? So what, okay, who wants to comment? What is the difference between an integrated urban development plan and an integrated plan of urban development? Who wants to?
One is a process, the other one is an outcome, is a product.
Okay, yes. Because integrated urban development is a process, first of all. But something else?
Yes.
What's the risk of having?
No, I mean the first is about realization, and the second is planning.
Well, also, it's also a thing that this PIDU, an integrated plan, can just become a list of projects. While the other one is actually aiming for urban development. So it's good, it's a difference. But the problem is Romania did choose to implement this PIDU as opposed to. So this is the big risk. There are many cities around the country, but it's happened everywhere in Europe. They will just put a list. Okay, we will have, for instance, most PIDUs in Romania will say, infrastructure. We'll put asphalt in all the possible peripheral streets. We'll make some nice parks. We will maybe, I don't know, upgrade a theater, and then we'll put some cameras, security cameras. This is everywhere in Romania. You'll have this security cameras to take the social. This apparently solves social problems because it increases how do you call it? Safety. Well, but this is what is integrated in all this. What would an integrated project be? An integrated project will be something that really has all these things together. In which you have, for example, you rehabilitate an old heritage building, and you make there a training center in which you might even talk to people about the importance of heritage. So and you use it also as a business incubator, and you help young entrepreneurs of making a business. So this is an example, just of a small project which integrates around. And now, let's go through, so what have we seen? Let's recapitulate. We've seen a city that's kind of in a drift. We've seen a reaction of these NGOs which have some plans, and then we have this EU coming and saying, we want an integrated plan. Why? To get funds. The only way the EU will give funds out to Romanian cities is only if they come with this plan. And which makes it a problem, because people will not do it for the sake of how good it is to make integrated urban development, but just for the sake of getting funds. So that's why it becomes a list. The city of Bucharest organized a competition, and it was actually in June 2010. And this is very different, because the problem in Romania, many of the architectural decisions or urban plans are made through a tender, in which the lowest price will win. But this situation was, with the first one, the competition was made. And you had the usual suspects who participated and said, we will build roads and bridges and blah blah. And then the team that proposed earlier, that's pedestrian space, thought, okay, let's bid for this. And so that was kind of the centerpiece, and thought, how can we actually integrate things around it? And the project, and this is when I just graduated from the LSE, and I came and actually helped with the integration of this project. So now I'm going to start talking about how this PIDU, this integrated plan for urban development in Bucharest, what does it entail? So, and it's kind of, because it won the competition, it was contested by many others the other person was like, what is this? I mean, you're pedestrianizing spaces? I mean, this doesn't bring money. No, and we made a point that actually this gives urban vitality and actually increases the economy, and it's actually very helpful for the overall welfare of people. So let's go through this argument, and we'll see also how PIDU actually looks like, and that may inspire you for projects that you want to do. First of all, the city hall gave us this area, which you see there. But it's impossible to deal with an area, a central area, because they they made this competition for the center. Each district can have its own PIDU. In each city you can have a PIDU for an area or another. It's all about area-based planning. It's not about the whole scale of the city. And here we divided, first of all, into 9 sub-areas, each of them with a certain identity. And we had to see what issues they had. The first step has always to be an analysis. An analysis has to come through all the possible fields. A historical analysis, and we already talked about this. How the main point of the historical analysis here showed that by creating this civic center, that area there, what happened was that the traditional commercial areas, which you see on the left in red, were destructured. And everything that's south of there kind of lost connection to the center and kind of lost energy. And it's now very much underused. So this is, but the historical analysis also showed that this was a unit and this is a very functional system before. But then we had this space index analysis. Space index is, how many of you have heard of space index before? It's at University College London. They have this, they developed software in which they look at the city in a very quantitative way, which is a problem, but by saying that we can tell you how much part of a city will be active. We have people walking by or riding by, how good the activity of stores will be, how crime levels will be in a certain area by looking at the urban fabric. So what you see here, you can introduce the topography and the geometry of streets, and you run through a software which will show how locally and globally that street, that particular place, is connected. So you're always going to have the main avenues. What has the vocation of a main avenue being red. Red means it has a high accessibility, while as you turn into blue, that means it has a low accessibility. Why would you like to have a high accessibility? To support what kind of activities?
Walking.
Commercial, yeah, commercial. And why would you like to have a low accessibility? For what kind of activities? Residential. So this is kind of the model. But if you look at the center of Bucharest, you see that, okay, this part north of the intervention, of the Ceausescu intervention, has kind of reddish aspects. If you look down, it kind of becomes very much green and blue. So it has a low accessibility. So this means that it support. And actually, in practice, this is what happens. And space index studies have been done everywhere in the world. And they started with London, and they saw that this correlates. Oxford Street, which is the reddest place in London, is the place where most stores are. Maybe you want to try this with the other one and see which has the vocation. So it's not about what happens, but it's about what can happen. So if you look at this, that means that this cannot support, let's say, commercial or this, if you want an economic development based on commerce, a big capital city kind of wants to. So something must happen to change this geometry of streets. Yeah? And then you have the second thing, it's called permeability. It's about the size of an urban block. And I'm not going to go into the whole theory, but if you have a small block, then it's more, then that's actually better for walking, for the experience of the place, and for commercial activities as well. If you have a large block, it's very hard to negotiate with your pedestrian. So you can see here that you have this area, again, south, and especially the huge block determined by the Palace of Parliament, it's quite inaccessible. So something has to happen. And you can think about your city and think, where are there huge blocks? And what is the effect of that on the city? And if it's good, or you want to keep it this way, or not. And this was actually a different, for some reason it doesn't appear. There's a white background, so you don't see the text. Well, anyway, this was about also showing that what you see on the left, it's areas from the north of the civic center. What you see on the right is from the south of the civic center. Heritage has been somehow regenerated on the northern part, while the southern part is very much underused and decrepit, and urban decay is oh, okay. None of my titles here. Anyway, this was a question: how much? I try to remember how much do you feel attached to your neighborhood, the city center, and the neighborhood you live in? And you can see that people are 16% only are highly attached to the city center, which is very uncommon. Most people, when you think of a city, I mean, if you think of Yerevan, what do you first think? What do you think? What do you have? Okay.
Center.
Yeah. Center. If you think, I mean, in most cities you think about and you feel attached to it. Well, in the case of Bucharest, we performed a very big sociological study. And so this is the second half. We did history, we did urban fabric and heritage, and then a sociological study to see what people think. And why would people be so attached to the center? Let's think. What do you think?
You're still talking about Bucharest, right?
Yeah. No, but I mean, what would people in any city be not attached to the center?
Because most of the time it's where all the activities are concentrated.
Yeah. So why are they not attached to it? It's only 16% are attached to the center as opposed to their neighborhood or the city.
Well, maybe because it's multi-central, not a single-centered place.
Yeah, but yes, that's a possible explanation. But in the case of Bucharest, let me just cut the pain and say that it's the issue that...
Well, it's so difficult to get to the city center in Bucharest.
No, it's not. I mean, it is public transportation. It's not that...
Yeah, it takes like 1 hour.
Because, okay, transportation, traffic is an issue. People don't get there. Then also they find it to be very, very crowded and traffic prone. So why would we want to walk in this noisy, chaotic, polluted area? Then another thing is also what happened during socialism. There were people brought to contribute to the industrial development who came into those areas around. And I did, for example, I did a study separate to this one and went to various neighborhoods and asked people, so where do you go? We did a mapping of activities. And I noticed that people who are older than 30s, who came with this industrialization wave, they are the ones who never go to the center because they don't, for them, it's just the workplace and the communist area where they live. And they never actually became parts of the city. So this actually made us think we need to do something to attract people to come to the center, to actually realize it's their city. It's just not something to be consumed by us. Okay, what is the problem? The most important problem in the center, traffic appeared there, 26%. So again, people do think about this. And so it is a big problem with a traffic choked city. And also, instead of actually dealing with ring roads, the transport strategy says you have to deal with ring roads and do not let any more transit to the center. Because you see the red directions is the fact that people to go north, south, east, west, they will drive to the center. So we need to do something to change this. What do you use? This is not the shape of the presentation. Anyway, it's what do you use when you go when you travel in Bucharest? And only 20%, in fact, those first 20% take the car. Not many people have. I mean, a lot of people have cars, but not most of them use them because of the problem with traffic. 34% use public transport, so people walk. So the idea is that then the question is why does the city hall invest so much in projects for cars when only 20% people actually use them? How democratic is that? Or is it because those people have more money and more influence or whatever? We did a pedestrian counting in certain areas around the center. So we sent teams of actually work with the urban planning students, and you stay in have you done pedestrian counts before? It's a very simple method. You just stay in an intersection and count people, and then you map them. You have to have a certain number of hours, and it's a kind of decision methodology. So this is kind of the result. So what you see is that you can barely see people walking in that southern area of the center. So it's another proof that something is wrong there. Well, in other areas, it's pretty much well done. Do people agree with some speed limits for car traffic in the center of Bucharest? The majority said yes. 74% said yes. And how many people agree with pedestrianizing the parts of the center? 44% extremely agree, 39% agree. So then, So this sociological study shows that people actually will support this. And again, if this was white, as I want it to be, you'll see that that green color there represents how much money does the city hall spend for car transportation, and then other things like hospitals and all the money going to the car. So it kind of goes against the democratic process. But also because we're dealing with a post-communist situation, people don't go and say at the city hall, we don't want this. So what we did, we used this analysis and showed, wait a second, people do want this, so people will support this change in the way we perceive mobility. Okay, but now what's very important, we've done this analysis, so we identified a number of key issues. What are people's perceptions? What are the key issues? What is the traffic issues? But for analysis, we have to go to a next step and identify what are the needs and the potential of a place. So this here is a roadmap of a PD, of how it should work and how it's written. Analysis, needs and potential. From the needs and potential, you have to determine a vision. And then, from the vision, priorities and objectives, and projects and programs. You're probably familiar with this kind of approach. If you don't, you can ask now or later, if you want me to go more into detail. But let's now decompose. So the main vision is a livable center. And a livable, attractive center for its residents and visitors, but especially for its residents, to bring people, understand, feel the center, let them repopulate the city, and heal, and a second, to heal the wounds of those interventions from the 80s. So first of all, let's now take the priorities and the objectives. Recuperating the center. So we need to cancel that effect of the boulevard and the civic center intervention, which blocked people from going down because they see the southern areas just dead. Anyway, we have to bring the whole identity of the center. We have to heal all these interstitial spaces that remained. That's the first of it. But also, as we saw, a main problem, and people really don't like this, it's traffic, it's transportation. And we want to promote alternative transportation in the city center, to change this model, to change the desire to use the car in the center by prioritizing pedestrians and cyclists. But also, this is also connected with a parking strategy. Because, so let's think, how would you like to have how many parking spots would you like to have in the city center in order for you to limit the use of cars in the city?
As less as possible.
Yeah, exactly. So when we introduce these small parking spots, also expensive parking spots, actually build how do you call that, multi-level and also underground. Because so we want the project within the city. What do you want to do? Well, that's the whole point. Because you provide less. People who want to come to the center, they should pay for that. London has a congestion charge. If any mayor in Bucharest or most cities in the world introduce congestion charge, you will lose elections. In London, he actually did it. Second time. But so the point is, we have to find a way to change this pattern of mobility. So what we thought was actually you take public spaces which are now just parking lots, as you see here, and you recuperate them. So you want to give them back to the city and be enjoyable and usable. But how do you get rid of the cars? You make underground parking. You make it quite not very expensive, but expensive-ish. And then on top, you can actually use the public space. So that's kind of the main strategy. And you liberate. This happened everywhere from the 50s onwards. So it's not reinventing the wheel. So this is the whole point. Small to medium-sized underground and multi-story parking spaces. They are built to solve the parking problem because there'll be people who want to use this. But then it'll also be around the center in this intermodal areas where you have metro, subway, underground stations. You have a lot of parking. People can just come there and from there go into the city with public transport. Yeah. So the whole point is what kind of integrated approach. So this is another example of integrated. We want better public spaces and we want traffic problems. Well, this is a solution using parking. Then, what is very important is also the regeneration of all those areas undergoing urban decay. And that's important in creating a sustainable local economy and improving connectivity. And we'll go into more projects more into detail. But also, not only going into areas which have deprivation, but also creating new engines for economic development. So these are those catalysts of economic development. So small, punctual things. The whole approach is not about, we cannot solve, I saw this approach in cities in your country. Some governments just take entire streets and renovate them. And then they live in London. So the people behind you don't live necessarily better, they don't have. What is more important? You can have this approach in which the government just does everything and then who sustains it? Or you can have an approach in which you have a catalytic insertion. You make something that becomes an example, and also, not only it becomes an example, but also it has a good function as an economic function, and that helps the area grow. This is the whole concept in creating business incubators, especially for young entrepreneurs. So again, it's an approach connecting architecture. You have decent architecture, such as good architecture being built, or heritage rehabilitation, but then you use it in such a way that you give vibrancy to the city, as opposed to just museify it. Yeah? So another example of the integrated approach. So this all resulted in 39 projects. And you can see here that one of the projects, do you recognize the pedestrian walkway, the tube, which I talked earlier? But then you have also squares being transformed, a whole park being recovered, and there were a number of competitions within our group how to do with that park. And one of the solutions was actually the blue thing. The blue thing was actually once a hill covered with houses. So the winning solution within the group was to make alleyways to replace the former streets, and trees to be planted in place of houses. So this will remain a park because the city needs parks. But it also would be a memorial park to the neighborhood which was demolished. And other projects like these, so we can discuss. And let's see some examples. But before seeing some examples, this cannot be done in one piece. It has to be done gradually. So it's actually so let's say there's three main steps. The first two will be one. You deal with the parking. So you build those you kind of block it in squares. You make parking underground. Then the second phase, you actually transform that into a pedestrian public space to be used. And everything anyways it has a step. And then the third step is to take the most representative public spaces and areas around the city and make an international competition for urban design and architecture firms internationally to come and actually, because we cannot propose in this group of 9 local architecture firms solutions for the main square which you see there on the right, one of the main squares, because it's a very complex situation which cannot be just covered in a PIDU, but you can trigger further development. Again, catalytic, that's the word, catalytic. Use it as a catalyst. So now, there are various projects, and this is, for example, one of them is recovering old markets, and this is a flower market in the south, kind of towards the south of our area, and using heritage, which is derelict, decrepit, into sustainable economic ways. Again, as prioritizing the pedestrians and cyclists, this tube covers about 9 kilometers, just at the beginning, and also there are cycle lanes that will be put throughout the city, just people to get used. And you can see there a mother with a child. They're the biggest, in fact, beneficiaries of this project, in a way, because when we did a sociological study, as people do interviews, mothers will tell you, where can we walk where can we go with our children? Just into a park. How do you get to the park? So this is very important to provide. You think about all the categories, not mention the disabled. So, recuperating public spaces. It's very important to have the approach. So these are various projects. This is going to be implemented this year. It's the Union Boulevard, the former Victory of Socialism Boulevard. It's going to be made into this kind of Rambla, the Barcelona model, walkway through the middle. This is kind of controversial why they chose to do this one, except the walkway, because this is not the biggest priority, but this is what the City Hall decided. The City Hall took this PIDU, and then each year they will fund a number of projects. So if everything goes well, at one point it will finish and we'll get actually to meteor stuff. Then also another thing is creating bridges, and I don't mean only physical bridges like such as this one. You can debate on the architectural merits, but this is the one that was decided. It's bridging as in rebuilding bridges on the Gruia River, which are cut by Ceausescu's redevelopment plan, but also they kind of destroy the megalithic line of that boulevard by buying commercial property for the first floors and making it into a hole and actually redrawing the roads that were once there, so that you can irrigate that with activity, which responds to what? The accessibility and permeability discussion we had earlier. So that's going to solve that, or at least aim to solve.
Can you expand that a little bit more? What is it? What was the solution there?
Which one?
The previous slide.
Oh, the bridge. The bridge. What was the solution?
Yeah, I mean, what
does it do? What does it connect? Or,
yeah,
so
this
it
former
connects.
building, how does it, what you just said, can you repeat it?
So I was saying two things. One is about bridges on the river.
Yeah.
Would you like me to talk about that, or
I think
Well,
it's
the second?
I guess
Second
second
okay.
one probably.
Let's go. Maybe to show. I'll go back to the beginning. To that image.
I didn't mean to do that, yes.
Do you see this? You see
Yes.
how this acts as a wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because of this wall, the accessibility map showed that there are no more links.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, people will not go on the far because this block is blocked. So what they will do, now everything is private. All these buildings are privately owned. But there are commercial spaces in the first two floors. And those spaces will be bought and will be cleared so that people can walk through arcades.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
a
that's-
good connection.
Yeah, so that's in order to kind of irrigate with
Yeah.
flows of people who now cannot go beyond the floor.
Or fumigate.
If I do F5. F5. Okay. Also making people to be closer to the river. The river is now actually just lined with cars. At least these are all very cheap. I don't know if you see how the solutions are not expensive at all. Except building the parking lots. But this kind of thing, interventions are not very are not about making severe transformations, but meaningful transformations.
Is this a polluted river, or
Sorry?
is this a polluted
Well,
river?
it's an interesting river because Ceausescu wanted a clean river. The river was not very polluted, but it was very muddy. So what he did when he did his whole plan, the real river runs under, and this is a channel with fake water. I mean, with water that you can have on tap. Still, there are fish
Filtered
there. No, there are fish there because there are people fishing all the time. But very few people from Bucharest actually know this. That the river actually is not a river. It's a controlled space.
Yeah, but where do you get this water?
Well, so the water.
It's filtered water from the
Yeah.
river.
No, but because they're fish, so I guess it's.
Oh.
So they might, yeah,
But
they might
it's
filter
flowing
the
water. It's not
Flow,
like-
it's flowing, but sometimes it's interesting because you see that it's not flowing.
Oh,
So it depends on the time.
It goes back and forth.
And sometimes, and it happens once a year when they actually clean, so there's no more water at all. And maybe this is when people will think, why is there no water? And then people pick the garbage and whatever and clean it. So it's a challenge. So this was a real river before, but a very lazy one, as in going on this and meandering. And so Ceausescu said, we want order, socialist order. So yeah, the river is a bit.
You got it.
And this is in a way kind of bringing some nature back. Yeah. It doesn't actually solve the real river. Okay. Anyway, so and this is an example of also going through and recreating an old street. This was one of the main commercial streets of the 17th century, but then they built something there and the bridge disappeared. And now they're going to rebuild this bridge and just make it go back towards the south. Yeah, and there are many other examples. Anyway, I'm not going to. This is just an image of a present.
Not this one.
Sorry? Yeah. So now, I think if we can synthesize, so we dealt with a city that was severely traumatized in the 80s, especially its people, seeing this and being helpless. Then about a city that was really attacked by the capitalist forms of the development which had their own effect. A public administration which was originally clueless and actually not clueless. They had an approach which was based on big money and big bridges. Then you had a team of people who believed in something different. The EU who gave a carrot. But as I said, in a lot of Romanian cities, there's one city called Craiova in which the main project in the Pidu is a huge bridge in the middle of the central square on top. They totally ruined that place. That on my opinion. While this one actually incorporated this counter-public, the EU, and also then a public administration that had to accept the results of the competition. They could have just said no. And going against the grain, and going against projects which are running now in the city, which are also about roads. But this also became a strategy. And also this became something that people know about, and they will ask for more. Especially the NGOs, they made a pact in which they say, we will abide that this is going to be implemented, and not about this particular project, but about a way of thinking. About a way of thinking in which it's a city of a different form of mobility. It's a city in which you can walk and you can, which public space is the most important thing. Not an aggressed city where people just feel like they're soulless members of a mechanism that's usually clogged because of traffic. So if you have any questions, I would be very happy to, or comments, or see connections with other places.
I was just thinking, when you were talking about the bridges buying out commercial spaces and rebuilding those streets, that would be more expensive than, you know, building a new neighborhood.
No, it's
commercial.
going to be a pedestrian.
Yeah, I know, but like buying out prime commercial.
It's not prime.
Oh, it's not prime.
That area suffered because what happened, it is in a way prime, but that boulevard never worked because it leads to nowhere, it leads to the parliament. So everybody who rented or bought commercial space there in a couple of months, 6 months,
It's not exactly a walking area.
yeah, it's empty. It's empty and it's like a dystopia.
Ավելի բան։ Կիևյան։
But Kiev is actually pretty active.
Yeah, there are a lot of shops, a lot of things.
Oh, how many?
Ha.
But in Kiev Street, they are always changing. So there are lots of shops, but they are changing all the time.
We are just trying to find like similar streets.
Yeah, I think as I was saying, I mean, for example, the LLC people, when they had to decide what should we do in Bucharest, and we talked about many sites and many interesting things, but they all said, the professors like, this boulevard. Because for Romanians, like, okay, another set of people talking about our boulevard. But then the problem is, this is very different. I mean, you have very rare cases in the 20th century at the end, in which you have Osman plus intervention in a city in Europe. Okay, except this is not okay. Yeah.
One of the key things I think in any kind of pedestrianization of old neighborhoods and especially city centers or any kind of city location is to provide also adequate alternative transport modes for people, because that's one of the big problems with many U.S. cities, especially in the West Coast and the central U.S. They're just so stuck with their own automobile, and there's no alternative. You can't take the automobile away. If you take it away, make it more expensive, people can't do anything. It's just like a bad policy. You add a bad policy to some injury, insult to injury kind of thing. So these strategies really have to coincide with a good public transport policy.
Actually, if we go back, when I said what is the modal split, that was the result of a survey. We also have results of a master plan research. So it's about 25% of people using the car, and the rest overall in public transport. Which means, one, there is public transport. There's been investment, not up to par with car traffic infrastructure, but there was investment in new fleet of buses, Mercedes buses. There's investment in the subway. But the point is that people use. So it's not a city that has to start from not having this public transport infrastructure. It starts from there, but the question is, where does it go? Does it go into abandoning it, or does it go into using it and taking all this new alternative let's say, mobilities together in a package. So this is a chance that, so the city doesn't come from a vacuum. So I think it's way harder to deal with Atlanta. You cannot do this in Atlanta. But you can do this in a city that's very dense. You got 8,000 people per square kilometer. Of course, it's the densest European capital. And so it's very dense, and it's you can just you can rely on public transportation existing, but you have to supplement it because people will not. The problem is the design of the lines. They were designed in the communist period where they were just their only purpose was to connect a factory with the residential areas, and they haven't been changed. So now I know people who will drive, not because they want to drive, but because they have to change 4 or 5 buses to go to work. So they will decide, no, I want to drive. So the moment when the city hall is going to make a study of recalibrating the public transportation, which, I mean, there is all the infrastructure. There are tram lines, there are a lot of trams, but if you just shift them a bit around, it'll be more popular. And I know many people, including business people, who just take, for example, there's a light rail, or people who would use it because it comes every 2 minutes, and it goes, what a car will make in maybe half an hour, it can make in 10 minutes. It just has a dedicated line. And people see this, and people want more. But again, it's a question, also it's a problem of what kind of projects are given more money for.
An observation, every time city planners, architects, they all talk about like bad parts of driving an automobile. But and we also always talk about numbers. We always forget that driving is also a psychological thing. It's exciting. People like driving, but not in the traffic. But a lot of times, owning the car is an exciting thing, and it's not because it's public transportation is not comfortable. We always miss that point in the calculations when it comes to this.
It depends, because as I was saying, there are more people who own a car than who actually use it. And the reason is, it's good to have a car, and if you want to have to go to the mountains or whatever, you can take it and whatever. But the alternative of using it every day and using for 1 hour to go to work, while you can do it in the metro and reading, or doing some stuff, or answering to emails, or listening to, This is the idea. Of course,
but it's about in your car. You can have your own privacy. I mean, you can listen to your own music without like.
Yeah, but it's a matter.
But this is the post iPod session.
But the question is, this is what London decided. So in London, the approach is, okay, you want this privacy. You're in a big city. You chose to live here. You want to go there. Then you pay for it. You pay £8 a day, and I think it's fair.
Well, Stockholm did the same thing.
Yeah, Stockholm was,
Singapore.
It wasn't very successful there.
Well, but actually, on the top converse, initially they started. People were against it. They did a trial phase. People liked it, and then they bought it.
It's always actually because if you ask them, people will say no to pay to. But then when they see the effects in London, actually there was just a talk in Cambridge like 2 weeks ago about the effects of the congestion charge. What happened was that, even though, so they use the congestion charging to pay for improvements in public transport, and this was noticeable. So all the surveys showed that there was better service for public transport. However, congestion didn't change, and they were making us like, why didn't it change? And they found out it's because they made an exception for people who live in the area, who didn't modify in numbers, but also for disabled. And they discovered that London has much more people with disabled passes than they expected, because
same thing happened in Tehran. There was this like a closed area for traffic for public, private automobiles. Only the doctors or like I think government people could drive through. So a lot of people just became doctors.
Or for example, in the 80s in Romania, they had a traffic calming measure of, if you have an odd number, you can drive this Sunday, and the following Sunday you'll have the same thing is actually in Mexico and in a number of Latin American countries. What happened, this didn't solve traffic problems, it just made a lot of people buy a second car.
Like a license plate.
They'll go with that.
I remember that. Oh my god, that was so painful.
They tried that in Tehran for like more than 20 years now, but it's just getting worse and worse.
More doctors.
More doctors, yeah. More bankers.
Okay, let me to like change a little bit
Yeah,
this discussion from transportation issues to another thing that maybe not all of us paid attention. I asked this question before to, now I'm asking again for them. So how happened that the municipality of Bucharest trusted a young architecture firm to do this PDU for
Well,
the town?
they didn't necessarily.
No,
It was a competition, and the competition had a jury, which is people from architecture faculty, from the Ministry of Urban Development, and then it took. Okay, are we still filming? Okay, basically it took a year for them to sign.
But for example, jury was shaped by the municipality from like academic, like.
I don't know how they shaped the jury, but the jury is very diverse. Yeah. And it did. But what's interesting is that this document is different from everything else that they've done. But now the problem is they cannot get rid of it. I'll give an example. Last week, I had to make a new passport for coming here, and so I was in Bucharest for 1 day. And it happened there was a big debate. One of the squares in the Piazza Romana, they as in the city hall, decided that so much traffic in this intersection. What should we do? Oh, we know. We're going to put all the pedestrians down and cross on like an underpass, so then the cars could actually go better. So in the end, the NGOs, especially 3 of them, were dealing with public consultation. They said, you didn't consult this well. In Romania, consultation means to put it on the website of the city hall, as if you are affected by something, you look every day on the city hall website. So the NGO said, we want a real debate. So there was a debate, I was there, I left my documents for passport, before taking it, I went to the debate. And so it was actually astonishing to see how, from their perspective, oh, this is very acceptable because London has them and everybody has them. And then I went and spoke up, I said, first of all, London had them in the 60s and 70s, this underpasses, but then CABE and other bodies of practitioners there, and they issued concerns, and they said, okay, no, pedestrians are, the pyramid. Pedestrians, cyclists, public transport, private car. This is the priority of a city. It's not about mobility as a whole, because it's very different. You don't walk to Abara. No, but for the city mobility should be according to the CABE or to the Toledo Declaration of the EU, like this. And then I said, because the reason why I brought it up, well, how did I relate to the PDU? I work for the PDU, so I know what the PDU is, and the PDU is now a document for the city. And then everybody else said, oh, yeah. So how is that intel? I said, oh, because we're creating public spaces for pedestrians, or where, on the side. So it's very frustrating to see this, that they're continuing to do things which actually don't reflect, and this is in the area of the PDU. Yeah.
More questions?
How much of the old times, like let's say the communist time thinking, still works there?
Where? In what field?
Well, urban planning, let's say.
Well,
or city management.
In both, a lot. In which, I'll give just an example. The approach of that boulevard, the traffic boulevard that I showed you, the market that is going to be demolished for that. It was the same approach. One, urban planning wise, we are the demiurgical figures that we can change the city. The residents, are just some peons with whom we can play around. We can do this grand thing that in the 19th century people were doing. What is public participation and consultation? Screw that. Sorry. But first of all, from an urban planning point of view, the solution was anachronical because it ignored the body of knowledge that if you have a wider road, you don't solve the problem of traffic. From the city hall approach, the way they dealt with evacuations and all that stuff, it's also anachronical and also reminding us of another system. So this is one example, but there are many examples. However, there are what's interesting now, the discourse used many times. The discourse is European and nice, but what they do is not. there are also a lot of the young generation, and it's also not about age, because I know older members of faculty there who believe in this and will fight for it. I know also younger members of the faculty or of the professional body who are very much opposed to any form of protest about that, and who agree with this, why boulevards don't necessarily like repeated. So it's not about age, it's about how you want to be open to developing knowledge coming from abroad and also from the realities of the city, because this is not about, we're not importing things, but we ask the people, and this is what they want. And I mean, and this is what we strongly believe is what is good, which is another problem, that we have. But urban planning and ideologies,
how corrupt is the, well, not
very.
Yeah, I mean, decisions are economic at base for certain interests, or is there, because that's how it is in Europe.
Yeah, yeah, it's can we stop that? Okay, then I also say that it is corrupt, and
as we have here. So
as it is in Manhattan, New York City.
Yeah, and it's actually the thing. I remember, for me, the biggest shock when I was studying at the LSE. It was not that we learned how many things, but then at one point we had a lawyer who came and talked about something urban planning, Section 106 in the United Kingdom, and then she said, "Oh, and these smaller municipalities, when they accept these lobbies from Tesco, which is this huge retailer, and they build them in random areas where they shouldn't." So are you talking about corruption here? And because I come from Romania, we know for Romanians are all we are so corrupt. What are we doing? And then I go there, and she says, "Oh, except London, Edinburgh, and some Birmingham, and some other large cities in which the body of the city hall is quite professional. In the majority of smaller towns where it's not professional, they will do things which can be considered as corruption, not necessarily for private gain, as it happens in more Eastern context, but they will accept the lobby very easily, and it's because it is a pressure everywhere.
We're doing favors and
yeah. It's also the political aspect. But there, I mean, it's the problem in Romania. Politics cannot be measured in terms of the liberal, the social democrat. No, these are really they're cliques of people who work in. It's very rare when you hear a social democratic argument or a liberal argument, or you would just hear.
They just have the names.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you just pick like they have interesting alliances. So it's a problem because also what I talked today also shows a lack of the political. Because by having the need of the counter public to do what the public does, it's also an example of a country where the political doesn't represent the police, doesn't represent the civic, doesn't represent what it should represent. And the problem is in most countries in the world it's like that.
He has a background in political science. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's kind of,
So for me, it's important to bridge, because I think it's very important to...
It's London School of Economics and Politics.
No. Yeah, good point.
Okay, any question? Okay, thanks. I don't have access to internet, but our president is in Brussels, and maybe they are discussing when Armenia will sign the association contract. So if they will sign, get ready, because all these things we have to implement in Armenia. And Romania actually is quite a good case, because like after maybe 5 years, we hope that we will be in the same condition as Romania is now. And I'm happy that this year we will have we will have another presenter from Romania, Catalina Prado, maybe I don't know if my name is right. So I think she will speak a little bit about historical heritage protection, especially in particular in ICOMOS and UNESCO sites. So I think it's quite good that we will have parallels with
It's going to be in Transylvania. She's an expert in Transylvania, so if you're into that, it's very cool.
Okay.
But I don't know if Romania can be a good example. So we're learning from our mistakes, maybe the whole point is to not do integrated development plan because somebody told you to do so, to give you money, but do it because you believe that it offers a solution to approach things in an integrated way.